Hello, my name is Marlene Bierworth, and you're at my cottage at Braeside Camp. I live here and I work here, and I've been with my husband for 41 years, and I have 2 grown children, Pamela and Jason, and I have 5 wonderful grandchildren, which I'm very proud of. And now I'm entering a new phase of my life. I've just been published. Dreams with Feet is about a celebration of dreams. Doug, my main character in the story, he has a dream for dog sledding, and it comes true in his life, and I'm excited about that.
Now all we need is a bedtime story before we tuck ourselves in for the night, said Doug. He glanced at Sarah, not for any particular reason, but just because he wanted to. Don't look at me, said Sarah. This little mama left all her storybooks at home. Well, I can help in that department, said George. Long ago, I heard a tale about a wolf named Carnage. He bent close to Sarah's ear. Do you think you can handle it, my lady? Of course I can. Sarah sat up straight and tall. Her eyes darkened as she tilted her chin higher. Okay, here goes. For 2 long days, Leroy and his team of dogs sat to wait out the raging storm. The Arctic can be unmerciful to the unskilled traveler, and Leroy's skills were sadly lacking. If the truth be known, he was probably a little foolish. The angry storm had swept upon him without any advance notice, or at least none that Leroy had detected. So the location of his campsite was very badly chosen. He was exposed to both the elements and anything else that might want to pay him an unwanted visit.
Our family was involved with dog sledding for a period of about 5 years when my son was a teenager, and he was our main racer because he was young and strong and he could just, really race it up good. So we were involved in going from spot to spot, the carnivals and those kind of things that they have for dog sled racing. We met lots of great people who love dogs and love the sport. It's a very cold sport, but we enjoyed being out there at that time in our lives, and I just caught a passion for dog sledding. It was a lot of fun and a lot of great social contacts. So when you have a passion for something and you're a writer, you just want to write it down. So that's how the story came to be. The book is basically a fiction story. It's not about my son Jason or our lives per se. It's about Doug. And as I started to write, he just took over the pages and he became his own character with his own set of problems and his own joys, and his family just took on a life of their own. So it's not about Jason, it's about Doug and a celebration of his dream. So when I was finished the book, it was very interesting to go back and read it and find out that there is nuggets of us in there. And I guess you do that in your subconscious. As you're writing, you just kind of put this little thing in that, oh, there's Jason. Now Jason would have done that, or Paul would have done that, or, even me. I think I would have done some of those things. So it was interesting to see that in there. Although it's not our story, it ended up being a little bit of us in there. So I guess that's a writer's privilege to do that.
The traveler shuddered, wishing that it was only the weather that sent the icy chills down his spine, for this was Carnage territory. Of that he was quite certain, for he had fearfully listened to the many horrendous escapades of the renegade wolf. Leroy had unharnessed the dogs and hooked them to the tow line, where they had buried themselves in the snow to keep warm. His was a small fire, and the wind threatened with every puff to blow it out, but somehow the flicker gave him hope and helped him survive the wait. It was late the second afternoon when the raging storm began to break up. The freezing temperature began to rise, but with the warmer wind came a cloud of fog and blowing snow that limited the traveler's vision to his small exposed campsite. The dogs stirred from their slumber. They snapped and snarled at one another. Leroy tried to comfort them, but they continued to pace and stare into that white, empty world of winter. Leroy's fears peaked. It had to be carnage and his pack of deadly wolves. The traveler and his dogs were easy prey, frustrated, hungry, and cold.
The targeted audience is young teens. They'll relate to Doug and all the problems that Doug is going through, the issues at school with bullying and just insecurities, all of those kind of young problems that teenagers go through. They're all in the book, and they're all stuff he has to live through to make his dream come true. And he brings a few of the kids along with him on his adventure, and so there's other characters that he's interacting with that just sort of make it a broader sense, you know, a broader picture. So it was pretty smooth going from start to finish writing this book, basically because I was in the middle of it, and it was passion. It was a very strong point in our lives, and it was easy to just let it all down on paper. Of course, that's the rough copy. I mean, when you start, you know, doing your second copy and your third copy and your fourth copy, that's when it gets a little bit more detailed, but the initial write was pretty smooth. It just kind of took a life of its own. And
Leroy threw another log on the fire, and it blazed to life. George paused from his storytelling, the effect creating a new tension. He leaned forward to stoke his own campfire. Doug didn't remember at what point in the story that Sarah had moved closer to him, but there she was, perched on the edge of his bench, her fingers gripping his arm with the strength of steel. Bob was gazing intently beyond the fire, deep into the dark night. The silent interlude was broken by the crackling of the burning wood. George suddenly picked up a cool end of a piece of a burning log and stood with a jolt that rocked Doug's nerves. He thrust the arm-sized log high above his head, sending the jagged sparks streaking into the starless sky. George's voice rang out with the voice of thunder, and the story continued. Leroy was half crazed. He waved his fiery torch like a come-on to the legendary carnage. The dogs stretched their necks to the sky and began to cry the howl of the wild. Suddenly, Sarah was in Doug's lap, her arms clinging to his neck. Choking, dragging himself from Leroy's Arctic campfire, Doug came back to his own. All 14 dogs directly behind them stood fully alert, and right on cue with George's story, they filled the night air with eerie howling. Doug could feel the tenseness in Sarah peak and then relax. Loosening her grip on Doug, she slipped quietly from his arms and sat with her head buried in her hands beside him. The choir of dogs finished their songs abruptly, as if a plug had been yanked from the amplifier. All that remained was the embarrassing silence. I can't believe they did that, said Sarah, focusing on the dogs and trying to avoid the 3 sets of human eyes that watched her.
Well, basically, I think the book wrote itself, and I was just along for the ride. And I found it interesting at the end as well to see that it was Doug's dream that came true in the story, and all of the things that he had to conquer, the fears, stepping out of his comfort zone, all of those kind of things are the same things that I'm having to deal with now that I'm an author, and stepping out of my comfort zone, and the fears and all of that kind of stuff. So I even draw similarities between Doug and myself. So it's very interesting how a book takes on a life of its own and becomes a part of you. A lot of the readers that have already bought my book and come back and told me their reports. They are looking forward to another book for sure, and they want to see it in a movie. So you know what, I'll just have to see where that all goes, but I'm open to do anything. If the world falls in love with Doug, then I will write another story about Doug. That's no problem.
I can't believe you did that. Bob's finger pointed accusingly to Sarah and then to Doug's lap. Then he lost control, howling his own tune of mockery. Unfortunately, it was contagious. Doug tried to smother the ripples of laughter, but the weakened dam was not strong enough to hold back the tide. He gave in with a roar, falling to his knees and joining the others until he was nearly delirious. Above the din, Sarah yelled, "I'm going to fill up my hot water bottle and go to bed." "What about the end of the story?" Doug asked. "Leroy can get eaten by those wolves for all I care," said Sarah. When the last scoop of water was funneled into the bottle, she marched toward the tent. The tone of her "good night" was filtered through embarrassment. Its sting managed to sober Doug and the others. George promised part 2 of the tale tomorrow night, everyone voting and agreeing that Sarah would be of a different mind when she cooled off. At least, that's what they hoped for.